Maintain your boundaries. This is a non-negotiable #1 self-actualization habit, an essential element of my daily inner work routine, because your energy and your time should not be available for everyone. You get to choose the people and the substances which you take into your life within reason, but honestly, let me say this very strongly before going on to these other habits. This is the foundation. This is the absolute foundation. A boundary isn't just about energy coming in, it's also about the energy that you give out. If you imagine a protective field around your identity, or even the clothes that you wear, the walls of your home, the borders of a nation, we build boundaries to keep us safe, but we also build boundaries to define our identity. And you need to be careful of leaky energy in both directions. There's very little chance of you moving towards a self-actualizing, truly authentic and powerful life if you're letting toxic people and dangerous substances or vices take away your energy. But you also need to be aware of the boundary moving outwards and not share with people who you shouldn't be sharing with, and not put your focus on things which are otherwise wasteful. You might spend too much time on the screen, you might spend too much time with particularly damaging individuals. It doesn't matter where you're spending the time, just pay attention to the outflow and the inflow, the #1 healing habit, the #1 foundation for self-actualization. Just watch your boundaries, build the boundary, protect your identity, keep yourself safe, and within reason. Most of the time, you are in control of what you do with your time. Yes, there are situations where you need to respond to someone who's being problematic, and maybe there's a family member or a friend that you don't want to just cut off. I'm not saying stonewall them or push them away, but you need to prioritize this. Let's move on to the second habit for this video. Looking at my list, it's self-inquiry, and we're going to be moving into interesting, like very esoteric, and then also quite practical. And the whole video is going to be an interesting blend between the two, so please stick around all the way to the end. I promise it's not going to be a generic self-development video. But #2, self-inquiry. And this is self-inquiry with a focus on trauma healing. I'm almost at 200 videos on this channel, the majority of which have been on trauma healing. I have recommended over 200 books across these videos. There are so many resources, not only on my page, but across the internet and in the libraries, which you can focus on. Because if you're not setting aside at least 1 hour a day, 1 hour per day, come on, just 1 hour per day to read some insightful books, you're not really playing the game on your own team. You can find an hour a day, and I'm not talking about reading generic personal growth books about how to get your money up or how to influence the world, literally how to win friends and influence people. I'm talking about self-inquiry in the difficult places, looking at things like complex trauma, abandonment wounds, attachment issues, sensual dysfunctions, either being way too much up or way too floppy, or maybe very dry or far too wet, any kind of promiscuity or frigidity, any kind of overly leeching onto people or otherwise being closed off from the world, every kind of energetic dysfunction that you could imagine. Not to go into specifics, if you know you've got problems and you're not taking the time to really reflect through something like reading books, which will give you more information, you can't really expect your demons to be kept at bay, because that festering wound inside of you is not being given the attention that it deserves. I've worked with people with exceptionally busy schedules, people who are in medicine or at a high level in business, and they still find a way to make 1 hour per day, even just half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening to read books. And it will change your life. It will genuinely change your life if you choose the right book. Check out the other videos on this channel, and it's straightforward. Let's move on to point #3, and this is a fun one, another deeper level conversation. If you're inquiring into yourself, you might want to develop the habit of self-conversation, otherwise known as active imagination or parts work. This is where you start to develop an inner counsel. Based on the material that you've been reading, your third habit for self-actualization is active imagination, to have active dialogue with the various subpersonalities and internal aspects of yourself that might give you useful information about how to get to the next level or how to drop some old baggage. Some of the popular parts that I see people working with are the inner children between the ages of roughly age 5 to about age 16. There are many different types of inner child. you've got the masculine and the feminine archetypes, the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover. And then on the feminine perspective, you've got the maiden, the mother, the crone, the huntress, the lover, the priestess, and I always miss one out. You'll have to let me know in the comments section. Many archetypes, but just the 7. You've got many archetypes to look at. Those are just a few. You've got your golden shadow, which is the archetype of your higher self. You've also got your dark shadow, shadow entities, shadow territory, shadow behaviors. These are things which I discuss in the Shadow Work Library at length, and I want you to buy this course if you want to escape from the YouTube rabbit hole of endless information, because I spent 4 years making this course, and the link is down in the description. But just focus on making the time to really dialogue with yourself. The way that wounds tend to fester over time and trauma tends to loop only in situations of ignorance. If you're going into these unconscious patterns of yet again blowing someone off, or having this cutting passive-aggressive remark, or hurting your body with a dangerous substance, yes, first stage, habit number 2, you start learning and reading the books. But habit number 3, stacking from habit number 2, you learn how to have active dialogue. You pause and have a conversation. There are many approaches to parts work, but just at the very beginning, check out some work on subpersonalities, check out active imagination from a Jungian perspective, and make sure you're doing your inner child work. It will really help over time. Let's move on to habit number 4, and this is a super simple habit. If you've been going too deep into the esoteric, maybe you spent too much time in your inner world, please make sure that you balance yourself out. And habit number 4, go for a daily walk, ideally in nature. This does extend out into movement practice. If you have a gym routine or a yoga routine or a dance routine, exercise every day. It's one of the most boring points I could possibly make. You know that I'm going to say it, but I do need to emphasize it. For someone who's very intellectually or spiritually driven, someone like myself who really likes spending time in the world of ideas, I need to lovingly command myself on a daily basis to spend at least 20 minutes outside in nature. I'm fortunate that I live within a minute of a nice national woodland, so I get to go out and actually be in the trees. But at the very least, even within a city, just get into a park, just be outside. And it's not simple advice based on mental health and well-being. Yes, you'll have those benefits. From more of a psychologically sophisticated perspective, the reason you want to be outside is that you're developing a relationship with nature, which takes you out of your own isolated, individualistic worldview. Because if you've been reading lots of books about you, and you've been spending lots of time having conversations with different parts of you, and you've also got your boundaries in place and you're defending those and maintaining those, but it's all like about you, you can become very black hole-like in your energy. And being out in the vastness of nature, even just going up a hill and seeing how small everything is and how small you are, you'll get that existential drawback so that you know your place within the wider picture, the wider community, and also the planet as a whole. Not that you're going to go up a hill and be dropped into enlightenment consciousness just because you went for your daily walk between meetings, but something like looking up a tree and seeing a squirrel playing, having a moment of mindfulness of hearing two birds having a conversation, and seeing how it feels when you just accidentally stepped in the puddle and now your trainer is soaked. It's grounding, it's humble, it will really help your well-being over the long term. Daily walks and ideally daily movement practice, but at least 3 or 4 times per week. For me personally, I'm mainly into calisthenics now, but I've also trained more weightlifting and bodybuilding styles. I've had periods of gymnastics and yoga. I've had periods of dancing. I've had periods of running and rucking with weight on my back. I like different trainings. Doesn't need to be every day, but being out in nature, probably something you should focus on. Let's move on to number 5, crossing the halfway point. The number 5 habit for self-actualization is digital persona deletion. And this is something which I really tried to word as accurately as I can. Digital persona deletion. Because we're in an age where we spend a lot of time on social media, and if you're anyone who does anything publicly, you're teaching publicly, and you've got people who are seeing work that you're putting on the internet, your digital persona gets particularly dense. Even if you're someone who's just using social media for social connections and leisure with your friends, or maybe even potential romantic interests, you have an avatar which is projected onto the screen, and if you get caught in the hurricane of likes and comments, and who did what, and who's with who, and what does so-and-so think of me, and you never take a moment to unplug, which at its simplest level means just turning off your phone at least 1 day per week. If you never do that, I can guarantee that you're going to get neurotic over time, and it's something that I really bake into my weekly routine as a non-negotiable foundation. At this stage in my online identity, I take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday offline. I don't work with clients, I don't respond to comments, I don't go on Instagram, and I do my absolute best to try and stay away from any possible avenue of reflection that I have a digital identity and I'm doing this digital persona thing so I can actually step back and be Jordan in my offline life. Yes, I'm also working usually on Tuesday and Wednesday. No matter what, I'm making videos, but I'm doing it in my real reality. I'm here. I'm not paying attention to what people said about my video from last week and feeding on the dopamine of, well done, Jordan, that's a great book recommendation, thank you for this, or I don't like your silly way of speaking, or who do you think you are with all those books, I bet you haven't even read them. Whatever the projections might be of positive or negative, I just shut it out. And it gives me an opportunity to reset a degree of my persona in a very authentic way, because I don't know about you, but I know that if I spend every day on social media, even just looking at it once within a 24-hour period, and seeing those likes coming in, seeing the conversations, I start to get sucked into it. And it really takes away my focus, it takes away my creativity, and fundamentally it leads to rising stress over time, because then I start to get worried about appearance and status, and it's just exhausting. It's completely exhausting, so please, delete your digital persona on a frequent basis. This can mean delaying your phone usage in the morning, 4, 5, 6 hours of the day. Don't go on social media. This can mean taking at least one dedicated day off per week. For most people, Sunday seems to work quite well. For me, I started with Monday because my weekends are particularly busy with client work. Or you can be a bit more extreme. Split your week in half like I do. I do offline Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm online for clients and the wider world. Or you can be even more extreme and do something radical like removing social media entirely or taking a month off here and there. You can do a variety of experiments. Just take the principle that if you spend too much time feeding your digital persona, you might end up wearing a glitchy technological mask that gets in the way of your true identity. And that's not self-actualization. That's you playing a game for likes and comments. Let's move on to the next point for self-actualization. This is a beautifully grounding practice, again, swinging from digital distortion and feeding on the validation of the world to habit number 6, gratitude. A gratitude practice which I recommend doing in at least one of 3 ways, either with conventional prayer, through meditation and journaling. A gratitude journal is fantastic. Or what I like to do, which is saying grace for my meals. I'm not particularly dogmatic about the way that I say grace, and if you have a certain faith and you want to pray in a certain way, then please continue with that. I want to focus on the point of grace because it's what I actually live. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've said thank you before every meal that I've eaten in many, many, many different ways. It's just creating a moment at least twice per day, sometimes 3 or 4 times per day if I'm having a snack, or maybe a particular coffee that I feel particularly grateful for. Just a moment as the food's there of, I appreciate, insert the blank. It might be appreciating the person I'm eating with. It might be appreciating someone who I had an interaction with that day. It might be sending a prayer of support for someone who is in a difficult place, maybe a client, a friend, or something that I see happening in the world. I try and bring a bit of my spiritual life forwards on a daily basis because it really helps to keep those demons of disconnection at bay, and it does help you to build your relationship with God. That can mean many things for many people. For me personally, that divinely inspired state of witnessing and being zoomed out again, that existential zoom out of seeing my small place within this bigger picture and doing what I can to make the world a little bit better. I anchor that with daily gratitude. I've never been one for daily gratitude journaling. I've never been able to stick to a meditation practice for more than about 2 years at a time. I think at a period at university, I was meditating every day for about half an hour to an hour every day for about 2 years. And then I go through seasons and I'll do fasts and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Isn't it great to have a spiritual life? Those things come and go for me. But the mealtime gratitude is so repeatable, and especially if you're consuming animals. I don't eat meat, but I do eat fish and eggs at the time of recording. Just a little prayer, just a little acknowledgement of thank you, salmon, thank you, chickens. I acknowledge that I'm taking life here. I'm going to bring this flesh into my body to make something even more beautiful. Thank you. Humble. Hopefully you feel the humility of that. It's not being sacrificial. It's not putting myself into victim consciousness. It's a strong move of gratitude, and it will help you to feel particularly powerful, which helps us go into the final step of this wonderful kind of wide spectrum self-actualization habits. And tell you what, I'm going to do something a little bit fun before going into number 7, because number 7, well, let me phrase it this way. If you've got your boundaries in place and you know what's coming in and know what's going out, and you manage this on a daily basis, that's something which is a foundation you wake up with, and maybe you'll manage it a little bit through the day, but it doesn't take any minutes out of your morning. And then you have a self-inquiry practice. Habit number 2, you're reading for that first hour of the day, maybe with a coffee, a matcha, or a hot chocolate, and then you go out for a wonderful walk in nature, followed by a yoga mat session or a quick workout at the gym. Maybe you're 2.5 hours into your morning, you're doing it all linearly, the perfect morning routine, and you could film it in a vlog style and get thousands of subscribers on YouTube. You've got all of your brand on point, and you go into active imagination, you're journaling and meditation internally or externally, you're stacking your habits. Fantastic. You're going for a walk, you're doing a digital persona deletion, you're then blah, 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 and you've got your gratitude prayer. If you did all 6 of these things sequentially every day, you are spending maybe 3 hours maximum in this particularly self-actualizing stack of habits. What do you do with the next 8 to 12 hours? Point number 7, for self-actualization, you need to have a meaningful career. You cannot bypass your work life. Your work is where you spend the most of your adult life. And even if you had all 6 of these habits neatly stacked and perfectly aligned, they are worthless compared to having a job that you utterly despise, or even in a better case scenario, just doesn't engage you and leaves you in an apathetic, disconnected state. You can have boundaries in place, and you can go for walks and keep your body and health in check and be grateful for your meals at the office. But if you fundamentally hate your environment, you are fragmenting your own essence. You need to align this. One of the most, I would say it this way, non-negotiable foundation with boundaries. But for me personally, my joy, my well-being, my sense of belonging in the world is anchored to the work that I do. You don't need to be as ambitious and work-focused as I am. I love what I'm doing here. YouTube is one aspect of it. I live for client work, in particular the one-to-one relationships. Fantastic. Making courses, also fantastic. Research, don't get me started. I love this life. But you don't need to be like me. Even if your work is being an incredible mother, or being an incredible father, or maybe supporting a local organization, doing what you can within your current role, if it's not setting you on fire over the consistent basis, and I think this advice of just take a job where you can get some money can be good advice for a limited period of time. You fall on hard times, you get something to get you by for 6 months to 12 months. But as a serious question for your 30s and your 40s, you better make sure, if you didn't figure this out in your 20s, to have work that really matters to you, because it will really define your self-actualization pathway. I can't emphasize it greatly enough. You do not want to be in a situation where you've reached retirement age and you've spent the majority of your hours walking in the wrong direction or painting the wrong wall, realizing that you actually needed to be over there, and you've lost the time and you can't get it back. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. You didn't express that true note of your personality. You didn't have the opportunity to use your energy to create something or serve something greater than yourself, because you just didn't take the time to reflect, or maybe you're too cowardly to make the shift from one career into another career, or to really devote yourself to full-time mothering or fathering, whatever it might be in your personal circumstance. Do not miss point number 7. For self-actualization, you need to have devotional work, because the majority of your life will be spent working. And that can be a joyful thing. That can be a beautiful path of growth. And I do believe in conscious entrepreneurship. And if you're interested in going down creative pathways of full-time artistry, that can also be a very meaningful way to spend your time. Just make sure you're spending the time correctly. I hope you've enjoyed the video. This has been a rapid fire 7 ways to self-actualize, and a final bonus takeaway, maybe point number 8 that I'm going to make up right now on the spot. What's another way to make sure that you're defeating your demons? It's to accept the fact that your demons aren't really demons. It's to acknowledge from a trauma-based perspective that any of those particular shameful vices or inner critic attacks or self-hating negative remarks, they're all mirages. They're all fantasies which start to dissipate when you spend the time to do your own trauma work. Usually it's a wounded part wearing the mask. Usually it's an old family story looping in the back of your unconscious. Your demons don't need to haunt you, and eventually you can shift your entire psyche towards a fundamentally optimistic worldview rather than running away from the things which go bump in the night. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let's keep actualizing, and I'll see you over here in the Shadow Work playlist, which is 5 hours of some of the best self-actualization content, perhaps on YouTube, but at the very least on my channel. I'll see you over there.